Manhood, Part 2. The closest I ever came to a summer of 42 was the summer of 73, a summer I spent at Rosemarin's bungalow colony in the Catskill Mountains of New York. My family had taken a bungalow there for several years, but that summer, the summer I turned 16, they decided to stay in the city. To my astonishment, however, they let me rent a bungalow with another boy, Perry, whom I'd gotten to know during past summers at Rosemarin's. It was such a half-baked plan. Two 16-year-olds left alone with their own bungalow for the entire summer that neither Perry nor I ever believed our parents would go for it. I recall laughing when he first floated the idea over the phone. But go for it our parents did. And then they convinced old man Rosemarin, the kind-hearted owner of the colony, to stick his neck out. He agreed to rent us the least popular bungalow in the colony. It was set at the base of a steep hill at the edge of a dense woods. He also agreed to defray part of the expense by hiring us as junior counselors in his day camp. He went along with the idea because he'd known both of us for years and knew we were nice boys, which we were, until that summer. Here's the sum of what I knew about human sexuality on Memorial Day 1973. What went where? I knew the proper names for the what and the where, as well as several of the coarser monosyllabic variants. I knew that if the man's what engaged the woman's where, under the right conditions, a baby was made. That was about it. Perry, it turned out, knew more. Not all of what he knew was accurate. But in our late-night conversations that first week in the bungalow, we talked a lot of baseball. He explained what getting to first, second, and third bases meant, what nonverbal cues to watch for at each stage, and under what conditions it would be possible to slide home. I was grateful for the analogy. I was appalled by the acts he was describing. Soon enough, Perry was putting theory into practice. He had a leg up in that he looked like a young Peter Noone, which, along with the fact that he now had a bachelor's pad at his disposal, proved irresistible to colony girls elsewhere, inhibited by the watchful gaze of one another's moms. By the end of our third week in the bungalow, Perry was juggling 3 girlfriends and was commandeering the bedroom for hours at a stretch. I, meanwhile, was torn. Strive as I might to give Perry privacy, to sequester myself at the critical moment on the screened-in porch at the front of the bungalow, I could not avoid the accidents of his performances, the sights and sounds, as well as the percussive thudding of bed against wall. I was the odd guy out. That experience, according to every low, medium, and high-budget teen film ever made, should have been alternately arousing and maddening. Instead, it was dispiriting and depressing. Perry's graphic accounts after the fact did nothing but diminish my desire to follow his lead. Except for Inger Stevens, I might have taken a vow of chastity. There's a fair chance that a reader in the second decade of the 21st century will not recognize the name Inger Stevens. There's a fair chance such a reader will have skimmed over earlier references to Summer of 42 and Peter Noone, come to think of it. But she was a Swedish-American actress, often remembered, if remembered at all, as the wholesome title character in a TV series called The Farmer's Daughter, which ran from 1963 to 66. I seem to recall watching the show once or twice, maybe in reruns, and noticing only that she was exceptionally pretty. The more lasting impression Inger Stevens made on me came from the racy, for that era, 1967 movie, A Guide for the Married Man, in which she played the wife of a philandering husband played by Walter Matthau. I saw the movie in an edited-for-television version around 1970, right about the time puberty had begun working its mischief. The plot's irrelevant. What matters is a single scene. Inger Stevens, in white leotard, exercising on a bed. She's on her back, hoisting her butt in the air, bicycling her legs. Then she's on all fours doing leg lifts, her blonde hair flying backwards. Afterward, as Matthau watches, she strips off the leotard. The camera closes in on her bare back. It's not an exception to say that that scene changed my life. Morbid aside, right about the time Inger Stevens was yanking me abruptly from boyhood to manhood, she was ingesting a lethal overdose of narcotics. My first sexual crush was likely posthumous. Whatever thoughts I had from that moment on of a what and a where co-joined involved Inger Stevens. However disconcerting Perry's bungalow trysts might have been, they were always counterbalanced by the image of Inger Stevens working up a sweat in that white leotard on that quilted bed. Enter into the equation a junior counselor named Kristen. New to Rosemarin's that summer, she was slender, with light blue eyes, high cheekbones, long blonde hair, and a delicate button of a nose. That last a decided rarity among the second and third generation Ashkenazi honkers that prevailed at the colony. I was also drawn to the exotic Y in her name, which seemed like the bendy kind of vowel Inger Stevens would have had in her name, except she didn't. I confessed my feelings for Kristen to Perry. It was a strategic move, since I feared she might otherwise wind up another of his conquests. He scouted her and gave me a heartfelt thumbs up. What remained was to win her affections, no minor task, since she seemed to have no clue of my presence at the bungalow colony or on the planet. Still, Perry and I decided I should woo her because he'd begun to feel bad about hogging the bedroom, and it was selfish of me to put him in that position. The thought of striking up a conversation with her terrified me, but he told me not to worry. "They can smell fear," he said. Besides, all I had to do was sit next to her during the Saturday night movie at the clubhouse and then, at exactly the right moment, slip my arm around her shoulders. Nature would do the rest. But how would I know when the moment was exactly right? Perry shushed me. "Trust your instincts," he said. The film at the clubhouse that weekend was The Heartbreak Kid, in which Sybil Shepherd stars as well Inger Stevens. Perry had enlisted a half-dozen buddies of ours in the cause, and the group of them ran a flanking maneuver worthy of General George Patton, peeling away members of Kristen's she-pack one by one to ensure that there would be a seat available beside her. She did not seem fazed by my sudden appearance on her left, nor by the perfect boy-girl sequence that materialized in defiance of the law of averages on her right, as if to underscore the fact that she and I were together. "Hi," I said. She looked at me in a quizzical way and then sighed and settled back into her wooden folding chair. The fact that she didn't stand up and walk out, I interpreted as tacit consent. Still, without a word, she turned her attention to the screen as the movie projector began to whir. It was roughly a half hour into the movie, around the time Sybil Shepherd makes her first appearance, that I slipped my arm over Kristen's shoulders. There was no pretense to the gesture, no fake yawn or coincidental stretch across the back of the chair. My instinct told me that the moment was right, and so I acted. To my amazement, she rested her head at once on my right shoulder. Instinctively again, I kissed the top of her head and then rested my right cheek against her hair. For the next hour and a half, I did not move my right arm. She did not move her head from my right shoulder, and I did not move my right cheek from her hair. Rodin couldn't have sculpted us more static. I lost all sensation from my right pectoral muscle to the fingertips of my right hand, but I did not move, not until the end credits began to roll and I felt her head rise against my right cheek. I sat up and let my right arm fall behind her chair. It felt like dead meat. As I was flexing my jaw, which also was numb, I sensed her eyes watching me under the darkness. I turned to face her, and then at once our lips came together. She had initiated the kiss. It was very soft, very dry, and without emotion. It lasted for perhaps 5 seconds and ended as the lights in the clubhouse came up. For a split second, however, the lights were on, and we were still kissing. I felt certain Perry had noticed. Tingling had returned to my right arm as we filed out of the clubhouse. It occurred to me to take her hand, but we were not quite side by side going up the center aisle. She was just out of reach. By the time we were on the path to the bungalows, our not holding hands seemed established. Mind you, except for that initial hi of mine, we still hadn't spoken to one another. Several minutes later, we stood in front of her parents' bungalow. She turned toward me and smiled in a mysterious way. Her first words to me were, "I don't know your name." "It's Mark," I said. "Do you know my name?" "Yes." "Thanks for the movie." "It was free." "I know that," she said. I didn't pay for you." She shook her head. I leaned forward to kiss her, but she turned and walked inside. "You're an idiot," Perry said, after I told him what had happened. The two of us were sitting on the porch, sipping cans of discount cola, watching fireflies flitting through the darkness. Mosquitoes were buzzing invisibly just beyond the screen windows. Every so often, one of them would crash into one of the screens, driven mad by the blaze of lights within. "I got to first base," I said sheepishly. "That's as far as you're going to get." "Well, how can you possibly know that?" But of course, Perry was right. Kristen jogged up to me as I was wrangling 7-year-old campers the following Monday and told me that she wanted to break up. As I formulated a counter-argument, she turned and jogged off, her blonde hair streaming behind her, and that was that. We were done in under 25 words, and I was left stranded on first base.